All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most persistent mysteries of our time. It all starts back in 1947. Something falls out of the sky and crashes in the New Mexico desert. Now, at first, the US military actually calls it a flying saucer. But then, just hours later, they completely change their story and say, oops, never mind, it was just a weather balloon. That one single contradiction kicked off a 70-year saga of alleged cover-ups, secret bases, and yes, alien bodies.
And this right here? This is the core belief that has fueled this fire for decades. The idea that something absolutely world-changing happened out there in the desert and that the truth of it is locked away, hidden from all of us. This is the central claim we're going to unpack today.
So, to really get a handle on the whole Area 51 legend, you have to go back, way back, all the way to the very beginning, to the one event that really lit the fuse on this whole thing. We're heading to July of 1947, out in the quiet, dusty landscape near Roswell, New Mexico. You could call this spot Patient Zero for modern ufology. It's where a local rancher stumbled onto a field of debris that would change the world forever. You know, those first 48 hours were just an absolute whirlwind of chaos and contradiction. I mean, just try to imagine this. One day, your local army base puts out a press release saying they've captured a flying saucer. That's a headline that changes human history. But then, barely 24 hours later, a high-ranking general is on camera holding up what looks like tinfoil and balsa wood from a weather balloon, telling everyone to calm down, it was all just a big mistake. That sudden whiplash-inducing reversal is what planted the very first seeds of a cover-up in people's minds. And what really fueled that cover-up theory were the descriptions of the wreckage itself. Eyewitnesses, including the first intelligence officer on the scene, a guy named Major Jesse Marcel, described stuff that was, well, just plain weird. There was this memory foil. You could wad it up into a ball, and it would just unfold itself perfectly smooth with no creases. There were these I-beams that were as light as a feather, but so strong you couldn't even dent them with a sledgehammer. And maybe the strangest part? They were covered in these bizarre pink and purple symbols, almost like hieroglyphs. This was definitely not from any weather balloon they'd ever seen.
Decades later, long after he retired, Major Marcel finally broke his silence. He came forward and said, yeah, that whole weather balloon story, it was a complete fabrication, a cover story. He claimed his superiors ordered him to shut up and even posed for those press photos with fake debris to sell the lie. And in his professional opinion, as an intelligence officer, the material he actually held in his hands was, and I'm quoting him here, not of this world.
Okay, so strange metal is one thing. That's weird enough. But pretty soon, the Roswell legend started to grow, because the official story never mentioned a crew, did it? Whispers started to spread. Whispers about a second crash site and the recovery of its occupants.
This is where the story takes a much darker, much stranger turn. A local mortician named Glenn Dennis said he started getting these bizarre calls from the Roswell base. They were asking about small, child-sized caskets that could be hermetically sealed, and they wanted advice on how to preserve bodies that had been, badly damaged and left out in the elements. Later, he said he spoke to a nurse from the base who was completely terrified. She described seeing autopsies on these small, non-human bodies. And her description? Large heads, big, black, almond-shaped eyes, four-fingered hands. It's the image that has become the iconic gray alien.
So think about it. If you have wreckage that isn't from Earth, and you have bodies that aren't human, you can't just keep them at a small airbase in New Mexico. No way. According to the lore, all of it, the wreckage, the bodies, was quietly packed up and moved under the tightest security to a final destination, a place specifically designed to make secrets disappear.
And get this, the destination had this surprisingly pleasant, almost ironic codename, Paradise Ranch. It was a name they supposedly chose to make this desolate, top-secret spot sound a little more appealing to the scientists and engineers they were trying to recruit. But let me tell you, Paradise Ranch was anything but a paradise. Paradise Ranch is, of course, the place we all now know as Area 51. It's one of the most secure, most secret locations on the entire planet. The airspace above it is more restricted than the airspace over the White House. The whole perimeter is loaded with motion sensors and cameras, and it's patrolled by guards who have the authority to use lethal force. For decades, the US government wouldn't even admit that it existed. Now, officially, it's where they test super-secret spy planes. But unofficially, well, it's famous for something else entirely.
For a long time, Area 51 was just a name, a place tied to vague rumors. But that all changed in 1989, when a man named Bob Lazar came forward with an absolutely incredible story.
He claimed he had worked inside its most hidden facilities, on technology that was not from this planet.
Now, Lazar's story was incredibly specific and technical. He claimed he was brought in as a physicist to work at this secret site called S4, which was literally built into the side of a mountain near Area 51's main base. And what was his job? To help American scientists figure out and then replicate the propulsion systems from a whole fleet of 9 captured alien saucers.
And the core of his whole claim, the real key to the technology, was the power source, a stable version of something called element 115. Now, back when he came forward, this element hadn't even been created in a lab yet. Lazar explained how this element could be used in a reactor to generate its own powerful gravity field, which would allow the ship to literally bend space-time and travel huge distances almost instantly. It was this stunning, science-based explanation for how a flying saucer could actually work.
So after all these years, what we're left with are two completely separate, totally conflicting stories. On one side, you have the official government line, and on the other, you have this rich, detailed lore that's been built up from eyewitnesses, whistleblowers, and decades of research.
And this is where the two realities just completely split apart. The official story says Roswell was a top-secret spy balloon for a program called Project Mogul. The lore says, no, it was an alien ship with a crew. The official story says Area 51 is for testing spy planes like the U-2. The lore says it's for back-engineering alien tech. And this creates two totally different explanations for all those UFO sightings over the desert. The government says people are just mistaking our secret planes for UFOs. The lore says no, those are test flights, but they're tests of human-made craft using alien technology. Two completely parallel realities.
So here we are, more than 70 years later, and the story is still locked in this battle between official secrecy and this incredibly persistent belief. One side gives us pretty mundane explanations for what seem to be extraordinary events. The other gives us this incredible, epic story of contact and cover-up. And with no definitive proof, no smoking gun, we're all just left to look at the evidence ourselves and decide, what do you believe?